Well, good evening, First Mill. Hope that you are having a happy and productive night tonight, and that you've been having a good day. It has been a chaotic time, I'll tell you, as the school is kicking up, and we're trying to sort out everything. And every day, administrators are looking at the numbers of COVID cases and kids who are in person learning or virtual learning or just missing. Trying to sort all that out. For me as a bus driver, it has been a little chaotic as well. But I really feel for those administrators and teachers and principals who are in charge of making big decisions. So tonight I was thinking about looking for a passage that was really peaceful, and I was reminded of a classic, so to speak. Young Simeon was only 12 when he had to confront a lion. He was in the company of 6 other boys who were grazing their herd of 300 cows in the Masai Mara Game Reserve. The other boys scuttled away when the lion surprised them, but Simeon hesitated, and the lion was about to strike Rioi, the cow that Simeon had milked just that morning. And he was determined not to see that cow die. So he threw his spear and stabbed the lion in the chest. The wounded beast turned on the boy and struck his right leg, breaking it instantly before mauling his head. And then the lion limped away without ever touching the cattle. The boy, Simeon, might have died except for an emergency flying doctor service that airlifted him to a hospital in Nairobi, where he spent nearly 2 months receiving medical treatment. From his hospital bed, Simeon declared that he would challenge lions again if they were to attack his father's herd. In rural Africa, people take good care of their domestic animals, even at great expense to themselves. Shepherds move for miles with their animals in search of lush pasture and salt licks and watering holes. In places where inhabited areas border game reserves, real conflicts develop between humans and the game reserve animals. But the animals have got the government protection. The natural tendency is for people to track down the marauding animal that has snatched a sheep or a goat and kill it. In Kenya, the government often has to intervene because herdsmen will stop at nothing when their flocks and herds are in danger from wild animals. Even deep in the inhabited areas, hyenas, leopards, and pythons are known to take their loot from a herd or a flock. Chege was an old man. He was 83 years old. And not too long ago, he fought a leopard that had menaced his herd of goats. He determined that before he died, that leopard was going to die. So he set up a trap and caught the leopard by one of its forelegs. Armed with a club, Chege charged in. He got too close, though, and the leopard caught his leg below the knee. In spite of the searing pain, he concentrated on hitting the leopard's head until the animal died. Chege later declared, "I'm not proud of what I did. I just destroyed an enemy. The animal having wiped out all my goats, I did not care whether I lived or died in the process of fighting it." 83 years old. In our society, we don't really understand that mentality or the dedication of a shepherd. I mean, who do you know that is a shepherd for a living, right? It's so foreign to us that we absolutely cannot envision risking a human life to save the life of an animal. But not to true shepherds. To them, it's the only way. It's their living, that's true, but more than that, it's their life. It's the way that they live. So in Psalm 23, we have this vivid depiction of God as our shepherd, this beloved and familiar psalm, perhaps the most familiar passage in all of Scripture, presents God not just as a shepherd, but not just any shepherd. He's our shepherd. Instead of just reading through it tonight, I want to share with you the commentary that was written by a real life shepherd. His name is Fernando D'Alfonso, and he was a Basque shepherd and regarded as really one of the best. He was the patriarch of his guild and of its traditions and secrets that have been handed down for generation upon generation upon generation. So at night, he would recite the 23rd Psalm in his language was a jargon of Basque and Greek. And he gave this shepherd's literal interpretation of this beautiful psalm. And what he said was that the psalmist David and his ancestors knew sheep and their ways. And David has translated sheep's musings into really simple words. So the daily repetition of this psalm fills the sheep herder with a reverence for his calling. Many of its lines are statements of simple requirements and of actual duties of a Holy Land shepherd, whether he lives there today or he followed the calling 6,000 years ago. The following is a sort of an interpretation or a shepherd's view of each phrase, of each line in the passage in Psalm 23. If you have your Bibles and you want to follow along, feel free to do that. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Sheep instinctively know that before they've been folded in for the night, that the shepherd has planned out their grazing for the next day. So a sheep doesn't have to worry, where am I going to eat tomorrow, right? When they trust a shepherd, I mean, the shepherd has provided in the past and has looked after me in the past, so they trust him with their future. Where they're going to eat, and where they're going to drink, and how it's all going to be taken care of never has to cross a sheep's mind. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, sheep graze from about 3:30 a.m. until about 10 a.m. And then they lie down for 3 or 4 hours and rest. When they are contentedly chewing their cuds, then the shepherd knows that that's when they're putting on fat. So consequently, a good shepherd starts the day in the early hours, and will start on the rougher herbage and moving on through the morning to the richer, greener, sweeter grasses. And finally coming to a shady place for the rest just before noon in the green pastures. That's the best grazing of the day. Sheep resting in such conditions, these happy surroundings, they have a contentment. So he leads me beside still waters. Every shepherd knows that sheep will not drink from gurgling water. There are a lot of small springs that are high in the hills of the Holy Land, and their waters run down into the valleys, only to evaporate pretty rapidly in the desert sun. So even though the sheep need the water, they won't drink from those fast-flowing streams. So the shepherd has to find a place where rocks have made a little pool, or more likely, he has been there before, or other shepherds have been there before, and they've made a place themselves, just to make a pocket there to hold at least a bucket full of water, so that the sheep will have still water to drink. He revives my soul and guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Now, in the Holy Land, each sheep takes its place in the grazing line in the morning and keeps that same position throughout the day. Once per day, however, each sheep leaves its place and goes to the shepherd, whereupon the shepherd stretches out his hand and will rub the animal's nose and ears, scratch its chin, sort of whisper affectionately into its ears. After a few minutes of communion with the master, the sheep returns to its place in the feeding line. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Well, there's an actual valley of the shadow of death in the Holy Land. And sheep herders, every sheep herder definitely knows about it. It's south of the Jericho Road, leading from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, and it's a narrow path through a mountain, to a small mountain range. Climatic and grazing conditions make it necessary for the sheep to be moved through this valley for seasonal feeding every year. Travel through the valley is dangerous because the floor has gullies that are 7 or 8 feet deep. Actual solid footing on solid rock is so narrow in places that the sheep cannot even turn around. And it's sort of an unwritten law of shepherds that flocks go up to the valley in the morning hours and down in the evening time so that you don't ever meet someone on the path. So if a sheep slips and into one of these gullies, the shepherd's rod is brought into play. The old-fashioned crook, right, would circle a large sheep's neck or a small sheep's chest and lift the animal to safety. Wild dogs will often lurk in the shadows of the valley looking for easy prey. But the shepherd, if he is skilled with his staff, can use that as a weapon. So the sheep have learned that even in the valley of the shadow of death, where they're facing evil, even there, they don't have to worry because their master is there to protect them from harm. You spread a table before me in the presence of those who trouble me, or in the presence of my enemies. Now, David's meaning here is a simple one. When conditions on the Holy Land sheep ranges are understood, there are poisonous plants that are fatal to grazing animals, and they grow pretty readily. So each spring, the shepherd has to be kind of constantly alert. And when he finds these plants, he goes ahead of the flock. He digs out the stalks, and he builds a stone pyre, some of the oldest of which were built by shepherds all the way back to the Old Testament days. And by the next day, the plants are dried out enough to burn. So once the pasture is free from poisonous plants, the sheep are led into it. And in the presence of their plant enemies, they get to eat in peace. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup is running over. At every sheepfold, there's this big earthen bowl of olive oil and a large jar of water. And as the sheep come in for the night, they're led to a gate, and the shepherd lays his rod across the top of the gateway, just above the backs of the sheep. As each sheep passes by, he kind of sort of quickly examines it for briars in the ears or snags in their cheek or weeping from their eyes or from dust or from scratches. And then each sheep's wounds are carefully cleaned with the water. And then the shepherd dips his hand into the olive oil and anoints the injury. A large cup is dipped into the jar of water and brought out to overflowing. The sheep will sink its nose into the water and clear to the eyes. If fevered, will drink until fully refreshed. When all the sheep are at rest, the shepherd places his rod within reach in case it's needed during the night. And then he wraps himself in his woolen robe and lies down across the gateway facing the sheep and sleeps there for the night. So after all the care and protection the shepherd has given it, a sheep may well think like David said in the nighttime, surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23 is popular in our culture, but it's really popular in Africa. The metaphor of God as a shepherd is vivid and appealing to people who are in really close touch with their domestic animals, both traditional shepherds and even farmers in rural communities. It's even a comfort in the face of all the current insecurity in Africa. There is all kinds of food insecurity there due to natural and political factors. Individuals and communities are under a constant threat, whether it's from, again, climate changes going on, or all the political turmoil that's there. So the precarious national and regional situations that have created the refugee phenomenon there have made people really appreciate how vulnerable everybody is. And people are regularly displaced by the power of the gun from the only spot they'd ever called home. So if you were living under such difficult and uncertain circumstances, wouldn't you want someone, a shepherd, someone who would look after you and care for you and feed you and water you and even be willing to lay down their life for you? In Psalm 23, we see that God takes care of his sheep. Every individual sheep is cared for personally with rich pasture and a place to rest before taking dangerous journeys and at the conclusion of journeys. Certainly, God takes care of the entire flock, but the individual can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God also has a personal care and concern for him. Think back to the parable that Jesus told, in which the shepherd leaves the 99 in search of the one lost sheep. The shepherd is the guardian of the flock who recognizes each sheep individually. The shepherd provides pasture and water and rest and shelter so that every sheep is satisfied and refreshed and revived. He also guides the sheep in paths that lead to well-being and life. With his staff, he keeps it from straying into the wrong paths, or worse yet, into the paths of the pathless wilderness. So in this hazardous life's journey, even in the narrow paths where dangerous predators may be lurking, the sheep doesn't have to fear, because the shepherd's rod is a weapon of defense and offense, even as the staff is a tool for guidance. So these two symbols transmit power, both power and gentle guidance, and help alleviate fear. In fact, if you had to sum up the theme of Psalm 23, you might just say it was, I shall not want. I shall not want for rest and refreshment. I shall not want for restoration and righteousness. I shall not want for protection in trouble. I shall not want for food or caring even in the wilderness. And I shall not want for a home to go to at the end of the day. The picture of Psalm 23 is not of a good shepherd, but a great shepherd. We're a shepherd that takes care of every need. It may not be when we want it or how we want it, but we can rest in the knowledge that it will be the very best. The only job that we have is to follow his leading and direction. We're not responsible for taking care of our every need, and couldn't even if we wanted to. That's the shepherd's job. As one little boy put it, the Lord is my shepherd. What more shall I want? Well, I pray tonight's study has been a blessing to you and yours. We ask God's blessing be added to the study of his word this evening. God bless you, Forrest Mill. Looking forward to being with you again online and in person, wherever you're able to do. And may God bless you the rest of this week.